for Reaper Metal Productions. This is the Into the Darkness podcast. And so that means, of course, we've got Thomas. But who do we have this week? Well, we have Mr. Mark Riddick. Happy to have you on here, Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, Mark, today we really are going to go into the darkness. Because I'd like to think that when you're tuning into this podcast, you know Mark for his large body work within metal. But maybe you might be one of those guys that knows his body of work. I don't know if it's a body, but his work with Justin Bieber. So Mark, I gotta know and hope that when Justin's people, Bill from Justin's team or whoever, came to you and is like, you know, Mark, I really liked your work. They were referencing this. Or
the NUNSLAUGHTER 7 and GB.
Yes, or this. The many flagellant kinds of art. Hopefully you can see. It's hard to show.
Oh, yeah.
It's a demon in dicks.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
So kicking it off, you know, when you talked about cringing about artwork from just being older and, you know, having your craft a little bit better. What about when you look at certain subject matters? Are there ones that are like, why did I do that? Or do you remember just funny stories of bands telling you to do something ridiculous?
I think as just like, you know, you guys could probably relate. As you get older, your perception of reality changes a bit. You become more mature in your perspective. So when I look back at some of my work, I can tell, you know, it's definitely, you know, artwork by a horny teenager, you know, versus the kind of work I do now. It's, I guess it's a little bit more polished, maybe a little bit more refined in terms of subject matter and also execution. But I mean, I can't change the past. That's where I was at mentally and also creatively. So I just have to accept it, you know, that was the choice I made at that time. And,
right.
You know, it's just, you grow as you get older, you grow and you progress with your craft, whatever that might be. And also the world around you, your personal situations might affect the way you view, or your worldview, essentially. So, I think generally speaking, I've done my best to stay true to the core of what I'm doing with my illustration work, in terms of really trying to capture that essence of old school underground metal music. I think that's really the staple of my work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I did in the past, you know, it's pretty ridiculous, and a lot of, now looking back, the kind of tools I was using, you know, like a lot of the stuff I did in the past was with just using a basic Bic stick pen, you know, nothing elaborate.
Right.
And now I'm using Sakura brand products, like Micron pens and Sakura brush pens, and they're just such better quality instruments. So obviously it's going to yield a tighter result. But one thing that I have to continue to do is just draw on regular printer paper. I don't draw on anything elaborate, any kind of specific kind of art paper or cold press or anything like that. I just basically draw on regular 20-pound typewriter printer paper, because I kind of like to have that still be somehow in touch with the old way of doing things.
Yeah.
It just, to me, having that sort of tangible, antiquated approach rings true with me in terms of what I'm doing, illustrating for metal bands. So it seems appropriate, and I'm comfortable with it. You know, artists, you know, I think ultimately, you know, an artist has so many different kinds of tools at their disposal. It's just finding the one that you're most comfortable with that helps you yield the best result, and to go that path.
Well, that makes me curious then too, as, you know, a progressing artist. So I'm referencing your Compendium of Death, you know, the art of Mark from 1991 to 2011. And early on in it, you have a piece that is, you said it's your first traditional pen and art if you
Oh, pen and ink.
yeah, or
Yeah.
pen and ink, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, so then like it just makes me wonder, like from a totally different realm. I have zero artistic ability as far as drawing, but like when you document stuff, like I wouldn't keep every recording or every riff I write as a musician, but like I would certain works. There's a point that you start collecting something and say, hey, I'm going to publish this or whatever. So an artist, I'm always kind of curious because, much like a musician, you can just kind of play and it just goes out there and it's gone, where you can develop ideas. Whereas an artist, you got to go to paper. And so you could have all this just clutter, essentially, that's like, when do you kind of establish to yourself, maybe even be honest? I would imagine it's just like this thought process that goes to a point to be like, I'm something, I'm going to make something of this artistic ability and start documenting that. And even in that, when you do that, still, I would imagine maybe there's pieces that do or don't even make the archive. So how does that go from just like noodling around to then, being something that, hey, I got to document that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever really had a question like that before, so I do appreciate that. So the pen and ink illustration that you referenced, that must have been 90, 91 or something like that. I drew that. And there was a project in my first high school art class, and I used a traditional inkwell and Croquill pen. So it was pretty tedious, but it was my very first pen and ink drawing I ever executed. And so I just really enjoyed the way that it turned out, and my art professor at the time, or art teacher at the time, was really good at pen and ink and watercolor, so I took notes from what he was doing and tried to kind of mimic some of that, along with what I think most artists do is look at album covers and consider some of the artists that may be influencing you early on, like Poshead, Derek Riggs, and Axel Herman and artists like that. But in terms of archiving, I just have large stacks of paper, drawings, on paper, and I would say probably half of them are actual finished, I got one sitting here, like finished, full-on pieces. That was one I finished yesterday for a Canadian band. So that's like a really completed piece, but then I've got probably the other half of piles of artwork. It's just sketches, unfinished ideas, stuff that maybe didn't go the way I planned. Like I've got something I'm working on for Warbringer right now, and I've tried inking it twice, 2 separate occasions, and I'm just not happy with where it's going. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board and create a new sketch. But a lot of the process is dictated by how well the sketch is executed, because that's basically the bones of a drawing. Yeah. It's going to really dictate the outcome. So the sketch has to be strong. And when thinking about sketching, I consider some of the basic graphic design principles, like the most important being composition, and then followed by stuff like contrast, which is basically something that takes place more so in the inking process, understanding where I want the heavy darks and where to leave the white to show through. But yeah, no, I basically have all my stuff stored away in boxes, so I have piles of art. And in terms of archiving, also, I just basically look to the publications I've done, like the books I've published, as ways to truly kind of archive my work in print, to have essentially a compendium of pieces I've created over a period of time, just so that they're all in one place. Because right now they're just, like I said, they're piled up in boxes. There's no structure, no order to them really. Different sizes and shapes. So the book really acts as more or less a timeline and a reference point. But like a portfolio, essentially like a portfolio of work. Yeah, so now obviously it's easy to just email somebody and say, hey, I want you to do some artwork, and then look at a portfolio work and really just spend a few minutes shopping artists anymore with Instagrams and stuff available to us to do that. So I'm curious, back in the day when you're getting your rise and stuff, I see here in the
the book, you do have what I presume is one of your early flyers where it's, artist needed, logos, artwork, tape covers, etc. Good artwork for good prices. Contact Mark Riddick, and then it had your address. So, like, I would assume that was literally how you got gigs back in the day.
Yeah, most definitely. A lot of it, it's just like, with the underground scene in the early 90s, it's before the internet. So you guys kind of know the story, and I'm sure some of your viewers may have been a part of the underground scene in that time period. But everything was done through snail mail, writing letters, and tape trading, buying fanzines, buying demo tapes. So a lot of the way I did my business was just dealing with people I was in touch with. I mean, you know Ash, your bandmate Ash.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I guess both of you guys probably know him. And he's like, for example, I think my twin brother was actually in touch with him when he was playing in Necrolatry and Estuary of Calamities, two of his early bands. So I mean, just stuff like that, making network with like-minded people who were into metal and publishing music, extreme metal, So hopefully that kind of answers your question. A lot of it just, people I was writing to or in touch with is who I did work for.
I was going to say, I'm sure it's word of mouth too. Once it gets out there and they see your work, then the references just kind of start coming in on their own, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I dealt with like doing a lot of filler art for fanzines, doing like fanzine covers and some of the borders and frames and stuff like that they would publish with interviews, and 7-inch record covers, T-shirts.
Well, that's where one of the ones that I actually didn't realize you did, or didn't even think about, and was happy to see, because it's the timeliness of this episode.
Awesome.
These deceased ones, Shrieks from the Hearst, and
yeah.
I didn't even know those existed.
those were 7 inches, right?
What's that?
Those were 7 inches, no? Or were they just?
Yeah, I think they were published quite a while after. I think one was for a 7-inch EP and another was for a T-shirt, and then I did another exclusively licensed Deceased T-shirt probably about 5 years ago for Transcending Obscurity Records. Trying to think. I think that's all I've done for Deceased.
Because that would have been the other thing to the answer to that question, being like getting your start and you're sending out flyers, hit me up for your artwork, is, Deceased are formerly from the Virginia area, the D.C. and just Virginia area, state. And so as well as yourself, and a lot of even your earliest stuff is traceable back to a lot of Virginia bands.
I've done. So I've done some stuff for. I'm trying to think of some of the Virginia bands I've worked with. As the Sea Parts, Witch Hunt, Morbius, Deceased. Those are the ones that come to mind. But I mean, really early on, I was doing stuff mostly for bands in the States, some overseas. But I would say most of them were domestic. I think I was in touch and writing to more people in the U.S. in the early 90s than I was folks overseas. I mean, I had, contact with a good batch from overseas, but most of my connections were American, I would say.
You're originally from Louisiana, is that right?
That's where I was born, but
okay.
I grew up in Northern Virginia area, so
Okay.
I've lived most of my life in Virginia.
Cool.
But yeah, I think I was maybe age 1 and 2 or something when I lived in Louisiana.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure how long you were there.
Yeah, just very briefly as an infant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something that I wanted to, I was wondering about, art and music are always heavily tied together, especially kind of in the line you've chosen to work with bands directly, at least for the bulk of your work. So I guess my question to you is, what came first, art or music, or was it simpatico? Did it kind of happen together? Because actually, I was a wannabe artist. I mean, I wanted to go to what is that school in Pittsburgh? The Institute of Art. Yeah, that was like my dream when I was in school, and I really worked on it, but there was a definite defining point for me in high school where I just lost the passion. I wasn't ever bad at it. I just kind of lost the passion, and music took over me playing guitar and drums and being in bands and stuff. And I just went the other way. But I also have been really good friends with a lot of professional artists like yourself, like Stephen Kastner, who recently passed away.
Yeah, it's sad. I
really
hung out with him one time, and I know he's from your area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to the Milwaukee Death Fest in 1998 with him and a couple other guys.
Oh, wow.
Super interesting dude.
Yeah,
really introspective. He was a very introspective individual, and it's a shame about his passing. I'm very fortunate. I have some of his prints, limited prints, hanging here in my studio, and nice. I think I have his signed copy of his art book as well. But I always admired his work.
Yeah, just a unique voice in the art world, and a very good friend of mine. I was helping manage him for a while, and we were really close, almost like brothers for a while. So I was actually helping the family, but I digress. So, with people like Steven, I know for a fact that music and art are almost inseparable for him. And he did take classical guitar, so he was actually like playing an instrument as well as he was progressing with his artwork. So he was always a guitar player. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people do, but I'd love to hear your story and to know how that connection kind of developed for you.
So, art-wise, I would say I've always had an interest in art since I can remember. Probably around age 6 or 7, started to develop a liking for art. And my twin brother and I, we also had a lot of creative endeavors that we shared. I remember one summer we were very bored at our vacation cottage in Minnesota, and we took it upon ourselves to create transformers out of paper.
Oh, man.
So we fashioned probably about 20 of these hand-drawn transformers that you could actually have little folds and cuts in them, so that you can assemble them into these vehicles or whatever. We're basically mimicking real transformers, but in paper form. So we always had like this sort of creative urge.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but in terms of music and art, I remember at age 10 I had a choice between an electric guitar and a skateboard, and I opted for the skateboard.
Okay.
So I eventually got into music at age 12. I had my first bass guitar. Music was something I was really into in my teenage years, and I think they were kind of, I would say, simultaneous, in terms of music and art, especially after discovering the underground death metal scene. Started playing in a band with my twin brother, and we published a couple demo tapes, and then I went and played in a band with my brother-in-law and published a couple CDs, and then just did my own thing after that. But it's always been kind of hand in hand to me. The whole creative process I find pleasure in that. To be able to more or less create something from nothing, I think is a truly unique human experience, and actually in a way makes us uniquely human.
Yeah.
But art, I always felt like it was more comfortable for me. I was able to execute a finished piece that was, I guess people responded to it better than they did like what I do musically, and that's okay. I mean, I don't expect everybody to like what I do, but art I just find more meditative.
Okay.
Whereas playing guitar or bass, I have to focus a little bit harder. When I draw, I can just kind of get lost in what I'm doing. I let the sketch is the hardest part. Once I get the sketch nailed, the inking part, it's just pure meditation.
Wow.
I'll just put my headphones on, listen to music, and that just kind of is a way for me to shut out everything around me.
Yeah.
And just really get, essentially, like I said, a meditative state.
Sure.
And I find joy in that. I mean, my perspective is that life is a struggle.
Yeah.
That's, to be human is to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're human, the best thing you could do is try to find as many pleasures in life as possible and try to embrace those. And I find some pleasure and joy in drawing. It gives me a reason for being.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I still do it. It's not even so much about the customer, like who, don't get me wrong, customer service is important, but it's not necessarily who I'm drawing for isn't as important to me as the actual process of drawing. Being able to have that problem in front of me that I need to solve, to have a customer say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and then it's my job to interpret their vision through my own lens.
Right.
And I bring my own set of artistic visual language to apply to that, and it's only I can do that.
Right.
It's like any other artist. Everything's filtered through their brain and through their hand.
Yeah.
So that's a unique, original thing, And I find that why not take advantage of it?
Yeah.
It's such a joy and a pleasure, and I feel like that's again, it gives me a reason for being. It makes me happy.
Can you just sit down anywhere as long as it's kind of quiet and you have opportunity to focus, or do you have like a certain place you like to go? Is there certain music? Do you kind of have to set the mood for yourself, and is it all dependent on the project? Is it always, like, does it vary? Is it different? Like, what is that process for you to get kind of that not inspiration necessarily, but just to be able to actually work into focus and kind of get yourself where you need to be?
Yeah. So before the pandemic, I used to frequent like Starbucks, a local Starbucks. And I put my headphones on, listen to music. Most of the time, nobody will bother me, which is I prefer because I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
But it was a way for me to get away from the distractions in my home,
Right.
with my kids.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong, I love my kids, but with like any parent,
You need time
your
to
children,
work.
they have needs. So,
Yes.
but since the pandemic, I've just basically been drawing at my dining room table, and then that's fine. I'm cool with that. I just in between things,
Yeah.
I have dinner started. Okay, this is gonna take 20 minutes on the stove. My son's outside. My daughter's reading a book. I'm gonna sit here at the dining room table and draw for like 15 minutes. So
Yeah.
it's not. Lately, it's been more in small increments of time
Yeah.
that I'm drawing, whereas before I could maybe focus. I'd say I could go about 2.5 hours before my hand starts to cramp
Okay.
up. But it'd be a good block of time, and then I'd go back later and do some more work. But yeah, so it's interesting you bring up Steven, because I get that he needs that space.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, it's just putting the headphones on and listening to some tapes or some CDs and just to go at it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of, sorry,
No, go ahead.
Reaper, but it's kind of interesting that you have that ability to kind of, you said you'll maybe just draw for 15 minutes, that you have that ability to kind of turn on and turn off, because I think even myself, with my creative process, I think if I'm going, I need to keep going as long as I can. And I think that, everyone's a little different, but, even from Steven, I keep referencing him because I was so close. But, I think with Steven too, he had many sleepless nights. Like, I feel like the guy was a vampire. He never slept. But if he was on a roll, he would just go. And he would work for like 15 hours or something. Obviously very different mediums, and he had his own little thing going on. But even myself, if I'm recording or trying to write something, it's almost like, to shut it off, it's like you're almost like killing the inspiration, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I get that. I would say with music, it's tougher.
Yeah.
Because when I sit down to record, actually when I sit down to play, I'm basically just going straight to recording. I don't sit around and fool around on the guitar. I don't have time to practice.
Right,
I just basically, if I'm going to pick up my guitar, the purpose is to record music.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely like last on my list of things to do. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the songwriting process again, going back to that starting somewhere and from nothing and seeing where it goes, seeing where it finishes. But I would say it's tougher because, you've got equipment hooked up. You're kind of in the zone. You don't want to forget that riff.
Right.
Whereas drawing, it's like if I have a sketch done, the sketch is the bones of the art. So the sketch that's all I need. I just put the pen down, I just had to pick up and put down a pen. That's all I have to do. It's not a big deal. So I'm okay if I need to get up. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would like to sit there for an hour and draw, but it's just not realistic all the time. Right. So I have to take what I can get.
You've been able to adapt your talent to kind of accommodate your new needs.
Curiously, I wanted to interrupt you there, though. Curiously, because when you were talking about your music, though, do you think perhaps you have that much of a working process because you are like your own band, essentially, where you have to, like, I feel like, I have recently, like, been more the last few years doing a lot more music by myself and stripped of the band aspect. And while I like that because it gives me that introvert quality that I want for that and control and so on, it also, I think, makes it a little bit more daunting because you got to sit there and visualize, all right, if this is an idea to a riff, it ain't just the riff now. It's the drums that go with it. It's the lyrics that I'm hearing that are just garbled right now. But, you know what I mean? Right. It's too much of a bigger thought. Whereas if you were just the guitar player showing up that just had to play his part, you know what I mean? Like, do you think that you would almost maybe have that same therapeutic kind of mental state because it's less? Just kind of curious on that.
No, I mean, for me, I've done that. I played in most of the stuff the only band I've truly played in was a band called Unburied. It was with my brother-in-law and a drummer, and all the other stuff I've done has been basically small collaborations with one other person, usually maybe two other people on occasion. But with that band, I have to show up, practice. I don't miss any of that. You know what I mean? It's just not convenient for my lifestyle. And doing the thing on my own, it's like, yeah, it's cool. I have a vision in my head of how it might go, but then I rely on guest musicians to do the parts that in my head I think, oh, I need a solo here. And then I go and check in with somebody to do guest guitar solo whose style I like or who I trust, Yeah. And I just kind of I let them have their creative input because I feel like there's only so much one person can do without it before it gets redundant.
Yeah.
And so I really lean on co-writers on occasion and just guest musicians to liven things up and help kind of see my vision through. I think for me, at least with the FETID Zombie stuff that I'm working on, the main thing for me is the core of it is death metal, and the Epicidia album. The core of it is death metal, but I've always had a fondness for traditional heavy metal and like the hard rock stuff with the shred guitars.
Yeah.
So I get all these guitar shredders to do some really cool melodic moments, so that the music isn't just death metal. I want to bring something kind of vibrant to it on occasion, but that's kind of where I'm at with the project now. But for me, it's more convenient to just go solo. It works better for my lifestyle and the demands of my time. So it's just kind of for fun, just enjoying the creative process, the songwriting process. And I've always been a proponent of don't let your creativity just sit on the shelf. So if you're making music or art, why not publish it?
Right.
It should be available for others to enjoy too.
Yeah.
Even though you're essentially kind of doing it for yourself. It's always a selfish. Every act is selfish, but it's for the self. But if you can put it out there and give other people access to it, so that they can find joy and pleasure in it too, then why not? What's the harm in it? And not everybody's gonna like it, and that's fine.
Right.
Everybody's got taste and preference. So I hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I think it's one of those things that like you mentioned, just getting it out there. I think it's one of those things. It's like, if it's not given to the world, does it really exist? You know, if it's just yours and yours alone, you know, like you said, you like give the opportunity for people to enjoy it or hate it or whatever.
But Cave of Forgotten Dreams to mind when you guys are talking about that. Did you ever see that with Werner from Werner Herzog? It's about like that.
You told me about this.
Cave in France that they found like maybe 30 years ago at this point.
Okay.
And it's got just ancient artwork in there that would be basically of a time period be like before like any early like Homo sapien, really. Then it'd be more like a, I don't know, potentially the kind of like animalistic qualities that are being drawn on the wall.
Okay.
That these could have been some sort of, because of that time period. It's like, how would these creatures have drawn that? And if this is totally off subject, I think it's almost not, because it's like that wasn't brought to life of any value until somebody did see it, and then they made a movie about it, and they were all going, "Wow!" I mean, we're talking about it on a podcast, but
that's what makes us really very unique as
it goes, well, you said that earlier, you know, and I thought that's interesting. The
ability to appreciate, to not only create but appreciate art, and when you think about, you know, it's easy to take it for granted. When you look, if you go to airport, for example, the signage, it's art. It's all about visual communication,
right?
And typography, graphic design, architecture.
Yeah.
You know, understanding space, the space around you, and how to make things fit properly in a space. That graphic design and art plays such an important role in our lives that we don't even notice it sometimes. You know, like a traffic signal, traffic sign, the way your car looks, and it's all subjective in terms of you know, our preferences and what we enjoy, but it's all around us and there's no denying it. It's part of what makes us uniquely human.
Well, yeah, it's like, it's very much the Cave of Forgotten Dreams, because it's like, well, because in there it's like, what drew this?
Yeah.
Like, what made this? And then you're trying to reverse engineer, like, we even knew these species of whatevers existed at this time period, and that couldn't be the case because this is too high. And then it's even more, it's weird that some of it is then like 5,000 years difference.
Okay.
I mean, 5,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that's, yes. So it's like, because what then picked up the pen and continued it?
Yeah, right.
And why? And then how did it get stuck? And that's all like very normal of like I guess a long lost art kind of concept, but it is very much so still in your death metal, because when you look at this book, I mean, this defines visually what death metal is. Now, death metal, this music form that's just nothing but, you know, sound, is now all of a sudden something.
Yeah.
It's very much kind of what you did say, Mark, about like the humanity aspect of it, defining it. Very definitive. I don't know, that's just crazy. I just wanted to comment on that. That was like, totally. I really thought about that. It gets deeper thoughts about it, because you know how there's like all these art things, like, and that's a question to you too. Is that, you know, you get a lot of this artsy fartsy language, like abstract, and you know, then you see those artists like the Lars Ulrich artist I look at, where he's in that bad Metallica comedy, and he's just, you know, he got those paintings that look like just like they took buckets and splashed it, and he's like mesmerized by this, and it's just like, I don't see it.
Yeah.
That like
subjective.
I think, well, the interesting thing about art too is, it has the utilitarian aspect in terms of, you know, like, here's a bowl that's designed so that I can eat out of it, or a fork, a utensil that's designed specifically so it's convenient for me to eat. Art provides a lot of convenience in our lives, but then there's the art that really pushes the envelope, where the art isn't so much about me visually enjoying it. Sometimes it's just about the philosophy behind it. So sometimes when you look at abstract art, or even stuff like Dadaism, which is like chance art, where they use they kind of, you know, it is a more random approach to creating art, so to speak. But you know, sometimes just the idea or philosophy behind the art. When you look at stuff like the found object art, stuff like that, that really it can still be art. I think so long as it incorporates some sound design principles. Not all art is great, just like not all music is great. You know, yes, it's subject to taste and preference still, but I think there's there's got to be some kind of attention to craft and how it's made and how it's finalized, because design principles come into play in terms of what we how we enjoy the art. When you look at a house that's messy versus a model home, for example, it's going to incite very different reactions.
Sure.
A hoarder's house versus, a luxurious home. So there is care that needs to be taken into the execution of, or the process of the art. But I think there is some value also in some of the abstract art that really pushes the envelope. And I think music kind of goes in the same direction when you look at artists like Merzbow or record labels like Dorobo.
Right.
I think one of the Dorobo is an Australian experimental record label, and I think one of the albums I have by them is basically sounds made by antennas.
Oh.
And it's just white noise.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I might listen to it once. I can't really get into it, but the idea is really interesting. Or a band like Scanner, who basically made music out of radio police scanner sounds.
Yeah.
Well, you did something too.
So it's just, they're really, I think a lot of that stuff is more for folks who really have more of an interest in the idea behind the music, or how they're shaping or changing or pushing the envelope a little bit, versus, some of the more straightforward sounds and visuals that we typically would enjoy.
Well, because you did, you did a project that was basically not a music project that wasn't, your. I thought you used like bones and stuff. Was it hexantans or?
Yeah, I did a project with several years ago with Mike Ford from Black Funeral. He was both of us at the time, like I said, mid-90s, early 2000s, very much into more of the dark ambient, neo-folk, neo-medieval type stuff. And I still have a lot of that in my collection, but we did a project that was I did most of the audio for, but Mike did a lot of the lyrics and vocal tracks for that project. So we only published a couple releases. But yeah, Mike Ford, he used a caneling, which is a flute made from a human hip bone.
Oh.
So there's I think another band called Zero Comma that had done that at some point. And this is getting more into the weeds of really experimental dark ambient music.
Yeah, what's funny that you had mentioned Merzbow and some of this music that's not necessarily considered music, and the police scanner and doing the police scanner thing, and you had mentioned like maybe the attraction to some of the fans of this stuff is kind of the purpose and maybe what's behind it all. But I'll also comment on that, and I'm going to reference Steven again, because he actually got me into a lot of shit that I definitely didn't listen to before. I like things a little more tangible, at least I thought I did. And a lot of the stuff to help him get into that meditative state that he liked to create in was stuff like Sun, and stuff that was very drone-y, and I mean, just go on forever, that sounded like either white noise or absence of noise or just low bass rumbles, and that's all this dude would, he would crank it, so it's almost like you're feeling it, so it's like, and that's, I think, the appeal of Sun when they play live, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's in my body, it's, they're all freaking out, and so that was something he really connected with, and kind of through him, I got to experience some of the benefit, or what some people were able to get out of that kind of stuff, where where some of us listened on a very flat surface and don't see that or get that or respond in that way, but then when your eyes are open to that kind of thing, maybe you're able to kind of open up more to that stuff.
I think a lot of it just has to do with what really resonates with people. Yeah. I think we're a little bit older too. You're probably in your late 30s.
Yeah, I'm 39. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I think because we've had more time to digest music, maybe we have a more open mind to some of that, and maybe we've been exposed to more things than perhaps some other folks, in their early 20s or something like that.
Right.
I grew up listening to stuff in the 80s, like 80s pop and new wave and stuff like that, and it just, even now, like this week, I have a new van that doesn't have I'm driving a minivan that doesn't have a CD player, so I had to buy a hookup.
Yeah.
And my kids are riding with me, and I want to play something that, they can tolerate. So like this week I've been listening to Tears for Fears, for example, constantly. A very, very, very good band from the 80s. I mean, it's still around, I believe.
Well, I actually just watched a live performance from them. They just posted like within the last couple of years. It's pretty cool. Oh, whoa.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, great songwriting with
totally.
that band. But I think even with my own, and maybe you can relate to this too, with some, at least for me, with some of my own songwriting, you can't help. I mean, some of those ideas came from things you grew up on, whether it's death metal or not.
Totally.
It just kind of gets in you, and you can't really shake it.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely, I don't think, I mean, some of that more abstract audio stuff is for a particular person with a very particular taste.
Or a person like any of us that a particular time or a situation, I think, or a mood can also be said, maybe, because I can't listen to this shit all the time, but like I love Swans, and if you look at their discography, it's like, some of it's pretty out there, and some of it's obviously the early stuff's more noisy, but I kind of appreciate everything they've done. I obviously like some more than others, but there's, I definitely operate on mood with music daily. And then you have the kid influence. So we all have kids. So it's like, that can Ellie tolerate Foghat? Of course, let's put on some Foghat. Or, my kids with Duran Duran or The Cure or
I've
whatever.
got Duran Duran coming in the mail soon. So
there you go. Yeah.
I'll be playing that next.
They love Adam Ant. Like I got them like Adam Ant vinyl, they like love them. So, they're into some cool stuff because of their mother and my ex-wife and myself. So, it's got kind of interesting, especially being a parent. It's
not too much a wonder why all the Swedish guys went like rock and roll later on after death metal.
Well, I have a funny story about, I'll share with you guys real quick about Dark Funeral. So, I wasn't on this tour. I joined Abigail Williams later, but they were on tour with Enslaved and Dark Funeral, and they got invited on the bus with Enslaved and Dark Funeral, and I guess they were just watching like Lion King and shit. But they all have kids, and I don't know if they were missing their kids or whatever, but they were just watching like Disney movies and shit. So I thought that was always funny, like Dark Funeral, these evil dudes with all this, all their gauntlets and shoulder pads and spikes and shit, and they're watching Lion King. It's kind of fun.
Well, here's Reaper Metal Productions with all its Reapers and this and that. And so we talked about a lot of these moods and all that we're in through music and whatnot. Kind of obviously one of the things that struck me then as the guy receiving is this Reaper art, which has always been the attraction for me. Like even, nicknaming myself and all that, I just like Reaper art. And so that catches my eye. And I wonder, Mark, do you remember that piece?
I don't. I don't know who the customer was. I wish you could be able to elaborate.
It's not for sale. Damn. Well, because that's where I was going to go with that. Because if you've been paying attention to Reaper Metal Productions, then you will know of the tie-in through Mark through this lady beast there. There's the sweet design on the back there. They're not this Reaper. I was hoping to make it that Reaper. That's why I was bringing that up. But hell, even that NUNSLAUGHTER goat with the dick, that was an early 7-inch. I remember when that showed up. Syphilitic Vaginas, it was a split with.
Yeah, nice.
But then this Crucify Mortals, then this is one of my favorite ones.
Exorcism?
The Exorcism
that's really cool.
Then if you pull it out, it's the full piece. And this is my band project, whatever. It was a project of mine. That obviously you've heard me talk about before, and we've had that relationship going for so long that we figured out, well, it was earlier than this, but it was through the podcasts that in 2011, it was this drawing that we did. We did a drawing around when Hellcast started, my other podcast. If you haven't seen it, then damn you need to check it out. It's right on the channel. Mark did this so graciously, and then a band got it for their cover, and that is just one of the many, many projects that we've done together.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that Reaper whispers fail, but but no, it's that establishment of community though that like I said, you know, it is. Like when you hear these sounds, you give this noisy stuff a visual. It all contextualizes it, and like so, like when I see a sweet Reaper, it makes that connection. When I see a cool art, all this stuff. So like it's kind of cool then because a lot of your stuff, at least through the ages, it definitely changed in its own. Where it like had more of like the '90s death metal 7-inch cover, but then there's just ones that literally you're appeasing styles. Now you don't do it all that often. But like when you do, I wish I had that. I had all my work done so well that I'm failing to have one of the examples. But something was like more comic book like.
Okay.
Do you like just switch things up? Like, do you get? I know you obviously have the passion, but like, do you like to switch it up every once in a while?
Yeah, I mean, if stylistically it changes a little bit, it's not intentional. I try to keep my style as consistent as possible, and I know it's something that's always evolving, you know, over time as I kind of play with my, you know, pens that I'm working with and my technique. But I would say that, yeah, I do like to change things up on occasion, whether that's illustrating as something that's a little bit off the beaten path for me, or maybe working with a client that's somewhat unconventional or sort of unexpected,
Justin
you
Bieber.
know. Yeah, no, seriously, I mean, sure. But, you know, or even on occasion just having a healthy challenge to help me kind of grow as an artist too. Because if I learn how to draw something new, that's something that I haven't repeated constantly, then I have a new tool in my toolkit, if you will, something else that I know how to draw. So I'm open to that on occasion, and I do know that it's going to maybe frustrate me a little bit, but that's okay. But I do like also the jobs where I have complete creative control. I just kind of do what I want.
Sure.
I'm comfortable with that. It's easy. I know I can turn it around quickly, but no, I do like to change it up. And in some cases, too, it's also maybe the medium in which it's being published. What did I do? I did something recently that I thought was a little strange. I don't like my art was printed on a dress or something. I don't know what it was. Something that I maybe never have had my artwork reproduced on before. Yeah. I might take a job because of that, too, because I'm like, oh, that's cool. I've never had, seen my work published in that manner before. So,
right.
But yeah, I'm certainly open to doing things that kind of step outside the underground extreme metal.
And you did that recently too on a bigger scale. That was of more. There was a Stand of Evil.
Oh, that show.
That TV show.
Stand Against Evil.
Didn't you? You did the logo for it.
Yeah, that was a television show on
AMC or something, right?
Hulu or something?
Pop TV.
Oh, Pop TV.
Was it Pop TV or no? IFC, Independent Film Channel.
Oh, okay.
So that was like you didn't really break out of too much out of your comfort zone because obviously then you've done many logos as going back to the compendium.
They were looking for something that was kind of dark,
Mm-hmm.
and I just did what I usually do: turn around, 10 to 20 thumbnail sketches and kind of let it go from there. See what kind of resonates with the customer. But yeah, that was unique because talking about seeing my work published in a different way to see it on TV. It's a little it's a little bit rewarding, because it's unconventional. It's not like I set out to do that. It just fell in my lap. All the work I do just falls in my lap. I don't solicit jobs or anything like that. It just it's whatever comes to me. I decide if I want to take it or not. And that was just something that's a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like. How does that differentiate doing? Well, because you did like calligraphy for Crucified Mortals, then too. You obviously have a knack for letters and stuff. So it's like again, hearing my interest in it from a non-artistic perspective. Like, is a logo that much easier, harder, or whatever to draw than the full-on artwork?
It's easier. Logo is much easier for me, at least, than doing the artwork. But I value them the same in terms of my price point, because a logo is the existing brand for whatever you're drawing for, whether it's a music group or a television show or a product of some sort. It's a visual language. It's a visual mark that they're making, and so that has to have some kind of value to it. But in terms of process, I kind of enjoy it because you have all these letter forms with ascending points, descending points, and different kind of curves and hard lines and edges, and to be able to, you can manipulate those in so many different ways that it's kind of a nice, healthy challenge just to be able to play on typography, to play on letter forms and expand upon them and see where they go. But a lot of it comes down to visual harmony, just with anything else. You have to pay attention to like the tracking, like the space between the letter forms and how that plays into whether or not a logo is going to be successful or not. So there's a lot of things to consider visually when working with logos, but I actually kind of enjoy them. I've done a ton of them. I just don't really share them on my website or social media or anything, but I've done probably about almost 20 of them so far just this year alone.
Oh, wow.
And I've had a lot of stuff that I've worked on lately. I just haven't been able to share it because of the customer doesn't want it shared yet,
Right.
for whatever reason. And so that's a little bit tricky to manage too, because you want to, as an artist, you want to stay relevant and stay somewhat connected to social media. So I've just been lately republishing older stuff from the vault.
Yeah.
And but yeah, no, I enjoy doing logos quite a bit, even though it's not really like I don't think it's necessarily my strong suit. I think illustration is more my strong suit, but I enjoy doing logos.
Yeah, so then obviously you go on and then you have graphic arts in here too, that like it always, again, that non ability to do art, like I'll do layouts and stuff for releases, and it's always something that comes up in my head that, like, man, if I could only just draw, I'd be so much faster. That you do that a lot. That, like, heck, getting a letter from you is just, like, beautifully articulate, and like you get it, you're like, damn, I just want to read this letter again. It looks so awesome.
And Kastner was like that too, yeah.
Because because you get like the border around it. It's just like, if you haven't had the pleasure of getting a care package from Mark with one of his letters, well, you're lacking. But it is. It's like, it's so just in depth that, like, but it adds so much to the experience.
It adds value. And I think a lot of bands miss that mark. The newer bands, especially. I've always really valued being able to put together, when somebody orders something, a nice package filled with. They don't just get what they expect to get. They don't just get the shirt. They're getting printed products with it too. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of a holdover from the underground scene when you get flyers in the mail. Yeah. And it's so exciting, when you're a teenager and you got a box from like Estonia or something, and it's got not only a fanzine but flyers for other fanzines and bands and stuff like that. So I always have printed matter that I enclose with orders or when I'm sending a package, because that creates impact. It's kind of like with a band, why does a band have an album cover? Why do they have a nice stage set or a nice live performance? Because you want to invite the fan base into your world, and one way to achieve it is just by inundating them with like a visual onslaught, It's kind of like when you think of art, you go to the art gallery, the pieces that really draw your attention are the large canvas pieces, because they're larger than you, they're bigger than you, so they're kind of engulfing you in a way, really truly inviting you into that artist's world. And I feel like that's such an important part of creating a visual brand and maintaining it and staying consistent and basically telling your story in a quick visual way. I feel like that's so vital, at least for me, to what I'm doing as a creative person. it's such an important part.
Now, how does it impact you as from one, I guess, reception to another? Because here again in the book is a large gallery of tattoos that people have gotten. Now, first, are these I guess it'd be a collection of works of like album covers that somebody loved and then wanted to get it per se the band, or then are you being commissioned to just do particularly tattoos?
I mean, I get asked to do tattoos for people a lot, but I don't accept those requests. And it's something personal to people. It's just that I don't have time to do custom illustrations for people individually. And I know, I guess part of it too is just that when I'm working on a T-shirt or an album cover, at least in my mind, it's gonna have a longer shelf life.
Yeah.
And it seems kind of weird because, I mean, a tattoo goes on a person and it stays with them until they,
Well, that was what I was going to say. But it has to have a different dynamic, you know what I mean? Of like, for you, the artist, like, it has to feel different, I'm sure, to be like, even doing the art. Yeah, and it's like, this is going on somebody's body, which is flattering, you know?
It is. I mean, to me, I don't have any tattoos, so I think it's crazy. You know, like, I would never put anything on my body because I'm afraid tomorrow I won't like it. So I mean, I commend people, and don't get me wrong, I'm honored and flattered when people do it. But I just, the stuff that people get done is just pre-existing art that's already out there, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that. It's just I just don't. That would be just another line of business for me that would take away from what I really like to do. Is just because I mean, you have to remember, I'm a music fan, a huge music fan first, and I want to do album covers. I want to do T-shirts for a band's tour or whatever, versus, tattoo art's cool. I mean, there's some amazing tattoo artists out there, some serious talent, but it's just, that's just another world that I just don't have time in my life to partake in. So I just try to stick to the music publishing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, so we can get you on about your day, I just kind of want to take a look at, I guess, the last, I don't know, even 20, I was going to say 10 to 20 years of your work where you have really got pushed into the limelight, at least in the underground scene and the extreme metal scene. You kind of see these ebbs and flows of artists kind of coming in and out, and, some kind of going away for a long time, kind of making a resurgence, whatever. You had, obviously, your Dan Seagraves and your Wes Benscotter, who's kind of recently to me, he's kind of come back. He had been kind of gone for a while, at least in my perception, and he was one of my favorites, in the 90s.
He was in Japan doing, I think, body art for a while.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had no idea, but it's cool to see him kind of get back into the game because I was such a fan of his work.
Me too.
Dave McKean, of course, more commercial stuff, but when you're talking about the kind of digital manipulation and mixed media, yeah, he kind of was a forefather of all that, and obviously influenced people like Kasner and the Giegers of the world, and all of these guys, right? And so I feel like everyone's kind of had their time, and the style developed for a number of years. So like if we look at the 90s and if we look at Dave, for example, Dave McKean, you had then Travis Smith kind of became the guy, right? There's always kind of the guy that kind of the torch gets passed to, and everyone's looking at that. It's kind of like Scott Burns, right? When Scott Burns was the producer, he was the guy, and everyone wanted to go to him. And then it became Andy Sneap or whoever else, or Colin Richardson. So you're that guy. And I don't know if it's fair to ask you how that feels, or if that adds any additional pressure, or if it makes you that much busier and it's good for your family and your pocketbook or whatever. But there has to be a fine line, too, where it becomes, I'm sure there's
a concern?
Well, there's a flattering element, number one, right? There's a flattering element of like not only so many people appreciating your art, but then the copycats of people going, or maybe it's just people that can't work with you because you're so busy, and so they go to another artist they see like, oh, I think you can give me something Riddick. So I think the Riddick name gets thrown where it's like, oh, I want something like Riddick, and a lot of these artists are probably like, well, let's fucking go to Riddick. but
it's like a culmination though of
so it's like all of these things of like you get your copycats that probably just want the work, and was like, I could do that. I can give you a Riddick piece or whatever. So when does copycat not okay? But I'm sure a lot of it's just flattering. But then, is there ever a worry? Like, I guess with Death Metal Underground, there's probably never a worry because it's always
going to be a goat that needs big dick.
Yeah, you're always going to need something like that. So I don't think you have to worry about kind of going out of style. But you have kind of been that name though, and I think that's kind of a kudos to you on that. And
well, I mean, I appreciate that. I'm grateful for it. I don't really dwell on it much.
Yeah.
I just basically, I'm still in my mind, a 15-year-old high school kid doodling on paper, doing this. Because I'm basically doing the same thing, right? I'm just drawing for bands. So I guess I don't really always step back. I knew that I always wanted to be like an artist like Posset, for example. Mm-hmm. And to see my work out there, and I feel like I've achieved that. I'm content with that. But I commend anybody who when you talk about like copycats, if anybody's picking up a pen to draw, I'm happy. I think it's important to have some kind of creative outlet if you have that ability or that interest. And I encourage actually copying to some extent because you have to learn. You have to learn somehow. I mean, every artist learns from somewhere, right? True. Whether you're looking at real life things or looking at something that's already made, it's like another artist or something. But that's perfectly normal and a good way to learn. I feel like. Sure. But yeah, I guess I don't really stew on it too much. One thing I have done that I kind of bit the bullet on was just kind of trying to get my tentacles out there for just kind of more of a variety of clientele. I know, like, for example, Craig, you guys are busting hard on metalcore, and I'm personally, like, I'm not a fan of metalcore, but I've had a lot of metalcore clients, and I'm okay with that because I have to consider, like, if that's the new generation of metal, or at least at the time where it was going, I have to stay employed. I have to I guess in a way keep myself relevant as an artist. Those are some of the sacrifices I personally made, and I shouldn't even, I don't really look at them as sacrifices. More like just different kind of opportunities to be creative. But this is the thing that when I was talking to like Banger TV last year, Daniel DK mentioned, hey, I always thought if an artist worked for a band, it was that artist's stamp of approval on that band, and it never really occurred to me that some people might feel that way. Like the bands I draw for are like bands I listen to, because I probably only listen to like 20% of the bands I actually work for. Yeah. Most of them I don't listen to. It's just I take the job for other reasons. It's either they're a repeat customer who I love working with, they're good people, or they're trustworthy, or maybe it's just like something different, that like, oh, okay, I'll try that out. Sure, why not? I think the artist's job is to be an artist. It's not necessarily about who I'm working for all the time. And I find I found that over time that's really benefited me in terms of staying busy, keeping the jobs coming in, and it comes down to I'm finding that time to have that meditative state, to kind of escape reality for an hour and a half or something like that. If no matter what, that's what I enjoy most, is that whole creative process. So that's where I find the most fulfillment. But yeah, I'm not worried about becoming irrelevant or anything like that. It's just like I said, when I still feel like that 15-year-old inside who's still drawing on paper and in math class, and I'll continue to do it. Nothing's gonna, unless for some reason health-wise I can't, but I'm gonna continue to do it otherwise because I love to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to even kind of bring it all full circle with where I was gonna say last, is that, like, there was a lot of emphasis on growth, looking back, cringing at things, where then there's, like you just said, basically sustaining. Just keep doing it, and it's the act of doing it. It's not going to be something that's an essence of looking back, it was bad or good. And so it's what makes me curious. Is there maybe a period in time where you can kind of look back and be like, that's like my strong suit, that like it's the one that you know, we used the word cringe earlier, like don't cringe at, because like I feel even myself, like there's a point in time where it's not always the latest and the greatest is usually your most comfort, but then the oldest is usually your but then like there's just even there's that one classic moment that you can't deny or something, you know, I guess for Slayer it'd be Rain and Blood or whatever, and so on and so forth. Like, so, like, is there a moment? Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly, though. There is that differentiating quality that they would look at Hell Awaits and say, oh, that sucks, maybe. Right. And so is there your Hello or your Rain and Blood that maybe have a Hell Awaits approach for you?
I like Show No Mercy.
There you go. We love that too.
That's my favorite.
Entirely a different question.
but from an art perspective, no. I found that every year I just make these new milestones. New and interesting things kind of come my way, and I choose to take the opportunity or not. I guess I just see it as incremental steps more so than what Plato would call the nous moment, the aha moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have pieces that I can look back on and be like, that was successful, and it still resonates with me now. Mm. But I always look forward. I try not to look back too much. I kind of try to live in the now and to look forward, and it's just one art piece at a time. You know, I'm gonna have really frustrating moments like that Warbringer piece I'm working on right now, and I'm gonna have moments of where I feel very confident in a piece. But to me, it's always a learning process. It's just a never-ending learning process, and I think most graphic designers or artists would probably agree with that sentiment, that it's just a never-ending learning process and you're always improving. So I can't say that I've had my my Rain and Blood moment, if you will. I don't think I've had that.
Quite the analogy. Well, learning, that's what the algorithm here on YouTube wants you to do by subscribing and sharing and liking and commenting. And all that stuff I shouldn't have to remind you about, because when you do all that, then it'll learn and it'll be able to tell us we got a new episode and be able to talk to you next time.